Hey everybody, it's Mike Sullivan with Born to Shine. Today we have an awesome guest. His name is Jeff McCoy, and he is the Associate Superintendent over at Greenville County Schools in beautiful Greenville, South Carolina. And Jeff, thanks for making some time for us today.
Absolutely, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So, what was your journey like to become the Associate Superintendent? That's a super high position with a lot of people looking up to you for your wisdom, for your guidance, for your leadership. What was your journey like to become that?
So honestly, Mike, that was not, 25 years ago. I'm a little bit of a nuance in the sense that many people don't spend their entire 25 careers in one district. I happened to join the largest district in South Carolina when I came down from Pennsylvania to South Carolina to take my first teaching job. And actually was elementary certified in college. And at that time, I moved down kind of late, and there were really no elementary jobs. And so I ended up taking a job at a middle school, thinking I'd do that for just a year and then go back to elementary, but ended up actually loving middle school. And so spent 4 or 5 years actually teaching various subjects in middle school. That was before the
Hmm.
time, when you had to be on one subject. And so had a little more flexibility there. And then had a passion for technology. So loved technology, used it with my kid, what technology, of course, existed back then,
Hmm.
but was very eager with the new technology, and finally was asked several times by the district to come and join the instructional technology team, to be a facilitator and train teachers on how to use technology. I was already doing some of that as a teacher.
Hmm.
And kind of worked my way from there. Just spent a lot of time in technology, mostly instructional, some technical side, and then missed the curriculum side. And when my superintendent asked me, what ultimately I wanted to do, and said I'd love to get back to the curriculum side, there was a position over here for academic innovation and technology that kind of bridged both houses, technology and academics. And so did that for a few years. And then my boss ended up leaving, and I was appointed as the associate superintendent here in Greenville.
How cool is that? It's interesting. We go where we think we're supposed to be, and then everything gets guided in a little different direction that enhances what we're doing. And so that's a cool story. And then, when you were K-12, Jeff, was there anything that you struggled with emotionally? Because for me, I was bullied, and that exacerbated depression that I had a predisposition for, and OCD and ADD. I had everything, and it really made learning a challenge for me. Was there anything, if you're comfortable sharing with us,
Yeah.
that you struggled with?
Well, I think, I struggled actually academically, which obviously, as you know, can boil down over into some of the social emotional learning, although we didn't call it that back then
Right.
necessarily. But for me, I went to a actually small private school in my K-12. There wasn't a lot of school options where I grew up in Pennsylvania, very rural area of Pennsylvania.
Mm.
And so, when I was younger, I remember K1, 2, really struggling to read, learning to read. That was a huge struggle for me. And when that's, maybe it's amplified more when you're in small class sizes and when
Mm.
you're in smaller environments, maybe. And so really struggle with that to read, and obviously had some self-esteem issues growing up with that. And then for me, it just kind of flipped the switch. And I think it was fourth or fifth grade, it kind of just kind of clicked for me. And then all of a sudden I became a very voracious reader. Learned very quickly to read.
Mhm.
Um, and but during that time, when you look at your peers, even as a younger kid, and they're reading and they're doing where you're supposed to be. And back then, of course, you had the different groups of reading groups and bluebirds and blackbirds and redbirds and all that. And kids know, they figure it out real quickly who's what groups are and all of that. And so, I remember that being a big issue for me, just one being a high achiever and wanting to learn to read, but just for whatever my brain wasn't ready to make that, that connection to the phonological awareness and and all of that. So, I would say that, has really, I guess, inspired, but also really just motivated a lot of the work I do, even as associate of academics, is just, sometimes helping parents, sometimes helping teachers and kids understand that, while we think that by end of grade, certain you should read, that's not always developmentally true how every child works, by design. And so I think sometimes it's just that patience, that you're going to get there, and hard work, and it pays off. But that we're not all we have to be very careful. I think that we're not cookie cuttering kids into everybody must be this at this point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so amazing how those moments that we struggle with can turn into how we're helping others and then developing that real motivation to help other kids in the same area that we struggled with. So that's really awesome. And then, what have you noticed is working well, Jeff, within your district, Greenville County Schools, to support well, like in your case and in mine, it was K-5 that we had our biggest struggles. So even just K-5, what are y'all doing to support your kids with their mental health? What do you see helping? Where do you see a gap that you'd like to see more of in a perfect world?
Yeah, so Greenville's very fortunate and very lucky. In that sense, we actually have mental health counselors in all 100 of our schools, and all 51 of our elementary schools, soon to be 52. And sometimes we have more than one. It depends on the acuity and depends on some of the needs based on those schools. So we
Mhm.
have those folks that are available in person for students. And then 2 or 3 years ago, we actually added teletherapy as well, knowing that some of our kids, sometimes some of our families, unfortunately, still a stigma around mental health many times. And so
Mhm.
sometimes for some of our families, they feel more comfortable doing that in the privacy of their own home,
Mhm.
especially if they're maybe doing it as a family
Awesome.
for whatever reason. And so, sometimes they're just more comfortable with that. So we have that option for K through 12. They have an option of doing it via teletherapy, or they have an option of doing it in person with that. And then just really trying to, I think, hone in with our teachers is that, that to your point about the, self-esteem issues and the mental health issues that sometimes come from academic issues,
Mhm.
obviously.
Mhm.
Just making sure our teachers understand some of the factors that create self-esteem or create social emotional issues, and then constantly just instilling those values in their classrooms. When they see a kid struggling, encourage that student. When they see, a kid needing to try a little harder, being able to push that student a little bit harder, but also knowing where that boundary is. So I don't think it's just the mental health, that you may visit once a month or once every other week. I think it's that constant reaffirming and supporting from our parents and our teachers to constantly have a pulse on that mental health of a student, maybe particularly today, that wasn't necessarily as much as maybe back in the past when we had all the I don't know, I guess maybe some of the issues with social media that creeps up today that has such a profound impact on kids. And we're
Mhm.
seeing it earlier and earlier where you and I maybe didn't have quite that same, well, I didn't, I won't speak for you.
No, no, same, same, same.
Well, didn't have quite that, it just didn't exist then. So we didn't have those pressures that I think now kids are under some very real pressures that we have to be a little bit more aware of what's going on in students' lives.
Absolutely. I love that. I'm really blessed to connect with people like you, Jeff, almost on a daily basis. So it's always such a blessing to hear something new. And you've shared something that I've never heard from any other superintendent or associate superintendent or director of curriculum, that you have the telehealth element. So that's awesome for a child that maybe doesn't feel comfortable at school and maybe going home with their mom and dad, and now they're sitting on the couch in a safe environment and then connecting. So if you're a superintendent out there, or associate superintendent, or even a teacher, or a psychologist at a school, and you're thinking, we need more, we need extra ideas, telehealth, that's just, I love that, because I can only imagine if I were a kid struggling and being bullied, and I struggled with self-esteem and that affected my grades. Just like you said, the two are kind of inextricably connected, right? It's like Ray Charles with music. My mom played piano, so I love music. And Ray Charles said, well, blues is just a cousin of jazz, right? All these different styles, and they're all in the same family. The same with academics and our internal emotions. If we're struggling academically, that affects our emotions, or if we're struggling emotionally, that affects our academics. The two are woven together, and
Yes.
I love that you have that telehealth. That's just such a cool thing. And if there's anything that's on your heart that you're thinking, man, why didn't this dude ask me that? I wanted to share this. What would that be? If it's a words of wisdom or encouragement or whatever's on your heart, Jeff.
Well, I don't know. I think, coming off, like I said, coming out of the pandemic and really even before years before there, I think a lot of the things that we talked about with the social emotional health and mental health of
Mm-hmm.
students,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, the everything is so competitive these days. And I think even so, everybody plays the game, the college game and getting the best scores and the best SAT and the best GPA and all of that. And I
Mm-hmm.
do think it puts a tremendous for the parents there out there. I think it puts a tremendous amount of pressure sometimes on students when they're not measuring up, so to speak, or they don't feel like they're measuring up with their peers, which can cause significant mental health and or self-esteem or what have you concerns that maybe didn't exist it did exist when you and I were in school. It just wasn't as much noticed and much, it wasn't as much, dealt with, if you will. And didn't have the resources, quite frankly, back in those days. So I think for us, I believe fully in that, getting students help that they need for whatever area that is. And I think that, it's really in the last 5 years that schools and districts have kind of made it their mission that, hey, mental health really is our space. Because for a long time, we were all kind of like, yeah, that's not really what we do. We educate kids. So mental health stuff, that's something that the kids need to do outside of school. But we've also realized now if come from the pandemic standpoint, if it was a good thing that came out of it, is that many kids don't have access to that. If we don't do it in school, it's not going to be provided for them outside of school. And you made the perfect connection. It's really academics and mental health. They impact each other. So kids can't learn if they're struggling with mental health. And sometimes if they're, struggling to learn, they're going to have mental health issues. So, I think what we've realized is that, and just to kind of, put that out there, like you said, for other school districts, is that, really taking a hard look at, do you have those supports for students that are as critical as the academic supports we have for kids, and making sure they have the mental health supports they need to be successful.
Right. Love that. Love that. Jeff McCoy, thank you so much, sir, for carving out some time with us, sharing your heart for kids and sharing your wisdom and all those years of experience. So thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.